The faint hum of static filled the room, the low thrum of an old transistor radio, a constant companion to Tom Marshall's late-night conspiracy show. He leaned back in his creaky chair, the mic in front of him buzzing with the muted sounds of his listeners calling in, his voice smooth and practiced, cut through the airwave. All right, we were back with the deep signal, where the truth is out there, folks. Next up, we got Danny from Portland, who says he saw something strange in the skies. What do you see, Danny? The phone crackled as Danny's soft voice came through, but Tom Seth's attention began to wander. He'd heard stories like this 1,000 times: a bright light in the sky, a shadow moving too fast, the government covering it up. His listeners thrived on this stuff, and usually so did he. But tonight there was an odd feeling in the air, something beyond the usual late-night talk of aliens and government cover-up. Danny rambled on about flashing lights over Mount Hood, but Tom was barely listening. His hand hovered over the dial of the radio, adjusting frequencies out of habit, letting his mind drift. It was then that he heard it, a sharp, high-pitched tone barely audible at first, like a needle threading through the static. He paused, his hand frozen on the dial. The sound grew louder, more distinct. "Hold on, Danny," Tom muttered, cutting off the caller mid-sentence. He turned the dial slowly, tuning into the strange sound. It was unlike anything he'd heard before, distorted almost like a voice, but twisted and broken, buried beneath layers of noise. Tom leaned closer, his heart picking up speed. "Hello," he spoke into the mic, unsure of why he was addressing the strange frequency. For a moment there was nothing but the eerie, garbled noise. Then, out of the chaos, a voice emerged. It was faint, distorted, but unmistakable. "Help, please, anyone hear me?" Tom's seized blood ran cold. He quickly fumbled with the dials, trying to clear up the signal. The voice cut in and out, its message disjointed, as if coming from somewhere far away or somewhere. His fingers danced over the controls, heart pounding, with a mix of fear and excitement. "This is Tom Marshall, host of The Deep Signal," he said, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline flooding his veins. "Who am I speaking to?" The reply was slow to come, the voice warping and breaking apart as though fighting its way through layers of interference. "Name, Elise, help us, parallel collapsing." "Parallel," Tom echoed, eyes narrowing. "Parallel what?" The signal deteriorated into a mess of static, the voice vanishing as quickly as it had come. Tom sat there staring at the radio in disbelief. He'd heard some strange things on his show before, but this was different. This felt real. A chill crept down his spine. "Annie, I'm gonna have to call you back," Tom muttered, hanging up without waiting for a response. He stood up, pacing the small studio. The old equipment, scattered around him, hummed faintly, the dim glow of the console casting long shadows. The radio signal replayed in his mind, parallel collapsing. Tom's curiosity got the better of him. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair, his mind racing with possibility. If this was some kind of hoax, it was a damn good one. But if it wasn't, if there was someone out there, someone in real trouble, he needed to find out. He took a breath and made a decision. The signal had come from a specific frequency, one that wasn't typically used for civilian transmission. His mind raced through possibilities: old government tech, maybe, or some kind of military equipment still lying dormant out in the countryside. Whatever it was, he needed to follow it. His destination was a remote, abandoned facility just outside of town. It was an old government bunker, long since decommissioned, but still standing like a forgotten relic from a bygone era. Tom had heard rumors about it, strange experiments, covert radio transmissions, but had never given them much thought until now. The road to the facility was long and dark, winding through dense woods, with only the thin beam of Tom's headlights to guide him. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as the uneasy feeling in his gut grew stronger. It was the kind of night that felt like anything could happen, where reality itself seemed to blur at the edges. When he finally reached the bunker, he parked his car near the rusted gate, its lock long since broken. The building loomed in the distance, a hulking concrete structure half consumed by overgrowth. Tom grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the cool night air, the crunch of gravel beneath his feet, the only sound in the eerie silence. As he approached the entrance, the bunker seemed to breathe with a life of its own. The wind rustled through the trees, and the faint hum of distant machinery echoed in his ear. He pushed open the heavy metal door, its hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the faint smell of oil and rust clinging to the wall. swept the flashlight beam across the room, revealing rows of old rusted equipment. Ancient radio towers stood like forgotten sentinels, their wires tangled and broken. In the corner, a small console blinked faintly, its lights flickering in time with a faint buzzing sound. He made his way to the console, his heart pounding. It was here, the source of the signal. He could feel it. As he examined the controls, he noticed a frequency dial set to the exact range where he intercepted the distress call without thinking. He reached out and turned the dial. The air around him seemed to shift, a low hum filling the room as the console came to life. Static buzzed through the speakers, followed by that same eerie voice. "Help." Tom's breath caught in his throat. The voice was clearer now, more distinct. "Elias," he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Tom, please listen carefully. The worlds are collapsing. You must help us." Before Tom could respond, the room shuddered. The air grew thick, almost tangible, as though reality itself was bending. A sharp electric crackle filled the air, and Tom felt a sudden pull like gravity was shifting beneath it. The room tilted, the walls warping, and in an instant, everything went dark. When Tom opened his eyes, he was no longer in the bunker. He was outside, but the world around him was wrong, familiar, yet twisted. The sky was a dull, sickly gray, with heavy clouds swirling in a slow, unnatural dance. The air smelled of dust and decay, and the buildings around him, though recognizable, were crumbling, their foundations cracking as if time had sped up. Tom stumbled to his feet, his mind racing. What the hell just happened? He spun around, trying to orient himself, but nothing made sense. He was standing in the middle of what looked like his town, but everything was falling apart. The streets were empty, the windows of the buildings dark and hollow. A figure appeared in the distance, moving toward him with purpose. As it drew closer, Tom recognized her. Elias. She was real, standing before him, her face pale and strained. "You made it," she said, her voice hoarse. "I didn't think you'd come." I didn't think I'd be here," Tom replied, still trying to catch his breath. "Where the hell are we?" Elias looked around, expression grim. "This is my world, or what's left of it," she explained quickly, her words clipped and urgent. The parallel world Tom had stumbled into was dying, its foundations unraveling as the barriers between dimensions crumbled. The signal Tom had intercepted was a desperate cry for help, a last-ditch effort to reach someone in the other world who could stop the collapse. "The two worlds are connected," Aletta said. "Whatever happens here affects your world. If we don't fix this, both worlds will be destroyed." Tom listened, his mind reeling with the enormity of it all. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. But before he could process it fully, a low rumbling sound filled the air. Elias tensed, her eyes darting toward the horizon. "They are coming," she whispered. "Oh?" Tom asked, his voice tight. "The enforcers," Elias said. "They'll stop at nothing to keep the worlds from being saved." Tom swallowed hard, adrenaline surging through his veins. He didn't know what he had gotten himself into, but there was no turning back now. Tom's heart pounded as he followed Elias through the desolate streets, the ominous sound of the enforcers drawing near. Shadows stretched and warped under the flickering streetlights, casting an otherworldly glow on the crumbling building. The sky above churned with dark clouds, threatening to swallow what was left of this dying world. "Quickly this way," Elias urged, leading him into a narrow alleyway that cut between two decaying structures. They moved swiftly, their footsteps echoing against the cracked pavement. Tom could hear the distant hum of machinery, a stark reminder of the unnatural forces at play. "Who are these enforcers?" he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "And we don't but Elias explained, "Tarsa. They control everything here, and they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens their plan." "And what exactly are their plans?" She hesitated before answering, her eyes reflecting a mix of fear and defiance. "They're trying to merge our world with yours to create a single reality where they hold absolute power. The collapse is part of their design." Tom felt a surge of anger. "So they're willing to destroy both worlds for their own gain?" "Yes," she replied grimly. "That's why we need to stop them." They emerged from the alley into a deserted plaza. In the center stood a towering structure, its spire piercing the turbulent sky. It was the main transmission tower, the heart of the enforcers' operation, and their only hope of reversing the impending catastrophe. "That's our target," Elias said, nodding toward the tower. A sudden commotion behind them made Tom turn. Dark figures moved at the edge of the plaza. The enforcers had found them. Clad in sleek metallic armor that seemed to absorb the dim light, they advanced with mechanical precision. Rhyolise shouted. They sprinted across the open space, the enforcers in swift pursuit. Tom's lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed him forward. They reached the base of the tower, and Elise keyed in a code on a hidden panel. A door slid open, and they slipped inside just as laser-like beams sizzled past them. Inside the tower was a labyrinth of cables and humming machinery. The air vibrated with energy, and the walls pulsed with intermittent flashes of light. "Follow me," Elise said, leading him through a maze of corridors. "Do you even know where we're going?" "Trust me." They ascended a spiral staircase that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. The sounds of the enforcers grew distant, but Tom knew they wouldn't be far behind. At last they reached a chamber near the top of the tower. It housed a colossal device, a complex array of circuits, screens, and antennae, all interconnected, in a dizzying display of technology. "This is it," Elise said. "The dimensional stabilizer." Tom stared in awe. "We have to recalibrate it to reverse the collapse and decouple the worlds, but it requires simultaneous input from both realities." "How is that possible?" She met his gaze. Before he could question her further, the door behind them burst open. Enforcers flooded into the room, weapons raised. "Step away from the console," a cold, synthesized voice commanded. Elise positioned herself between Tom and the enforcers. "If we don't have much time," she whispered urgently, "Kale, I'll hold them off. You need to activate the stabilizer." "I'm not leaving you." "You must," she insisted. An enforcer stepped forward, aiming a weapon at Elise. Without warning, she lunged at him, knocking the weapon aside. Chaos erupted as she engaged them, her movements swift and calculated. Tom hesitated for a split second before turning to the console. His hands trembled as he scanned the bewildering array of controls. Symbols and codes flashed across the screens. None of it made sense. "Think, Tom," he muttered to himself. Amid the confusion, a familiar voice echoed in his mind. "Use the frequency." He recalled his experience as a radio host, the countless hours spent adjusting frequencies, interpreting signal. Taking a deep breath, he began to manipulate the controls, tuning into the harmonic resonance between the two worlds. Behind him, the sounds of struggle intensified. He risked a glance and saw Elise fighting valiantly, but she was outnumbered. "Almost there," he whispered. Focusing intently, the console responded to his adjustments, the device humming louder as it powered up. Suddenly, an enforcer broke away from the skirmish and charged toward him. Before Tom could react, the enforcer was intercepted by another figure, a man who moved with surprising agility. "Newcomer," shouted to Tom, blocking the enforcer's path. Tom didn't have time to question this unexpected ally. He locked in the final sequence, and the stabilizer roared to life. A shockwave rippled outward, causing the entire tower to tremble. The enforcers faltered, their systems disrupted by the surge of energy. Elise took the opportunity to break free and rushed to Tom's side. "Did you do it?" "I think so," he replied. "But what now?" The building shook violently outside. The sky split open, beams of light tearing through the darkness as the worlds began to realign. Elise's expression softened. "You need to return to your world." "But what about you?" She smiled sadly. "My place is here. There's still work to be done." Before he could argue, a blinding light enveloped them. Tom felt himself being pulled away, weightless and untethered. He awoke with a start, the familiar surroundings of his radio station coming into focus. The soft glow of the equipment, lights, the hum of the air conditioner. It was all just as he had left it. For a moment, he wondered if it had all been a dream. But as he sat up, he noticed subtle differences. A newspaper lay on the desk with headlines he didn't recognize. Photographs on the walls showed people he couldn't recall meeting. His heart skipped a beat. The door to the studio opened and a colleague poked his head in. "Hey, Tom, you good for the broadcast tonight?" "Yeah," Tom replied automatically. The colleague gave him a thumbs up and disappeared. Tom rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of it all. The worlds had been partially merged. That much was clear, but what did it mean for him, for everyone? He turned on the radio equipment, his hands moving on their own accord. As the familiar static filled his ears, a voice emerged, clear and unmistakable. "Tom, can you hear me?" His breath caught. "Yes," she replied. We did it. The collapse has been stopped, but the connection remains. What's happening, things here are different. The worlds have stabilized in a new equilibrium, Cherikshi explained. Some elements have merged. It's a fresh start, a chance to build something better. Tom leaned back, absorbing her words. So what now? Now, she said with a hint of hope in her voice, together. There's much to learn, and perhaps with this connection, we can help each other avoid the mistakes of the past. A faint smile crossed his lips. Looks like my show just got a whole lot more interesting. Indeed, Eli's agreed. Stay in touch. The line went silent, but Tom felt a newfound sense of purpose. He adjusted the microphone and began his broadcast. Good evening, listeners. This is Tom Marshall, and tonight we embark on a new journey together. The world is changing in ways we can't yet fully comprehend. But one thing's for sure, you're not alone. Stay tuned as we explore this brave new reality. As he spoke, messages began flooding in calls, texts, signals from voices both familiar and new. The airwaves buzzed with energy, a chorus of souls reaching out across the ether. Tom knew challenges lay ahead, but with connection came hope. And as the night unfolded, he embraced the uncertainty, ready to face whatever came next.